Hello, what a difference a few days will make in the weather. That's the shelf that I made for the dishes, a dish rack, and I did a video on that already. This is the sink. I made this, I molded it out of air dry clay. And then that little piece of that little brick thing off to the right, that was the mold for the basin, and that was made from epoxy sculpt. And I'm just dusting it off in between sanding. And those are the legs. They'll be made out of balsa wood, and I'm just checking to see the height of the sink compared to the dowel. Make sure I get the scale correct. And that's the backsplash, but there'll be a piece of wood in between to put the faucet set on. The first house my husband and I bought was an old house that was actually a Sears catalog house. And it had a sink in it like this, and I'm so sorry I didn't keep it. I love those old sinks. That little piece of hardware that you're looking at right now, I'll put the link below for where I got that. And I'm just eyeballing the measurements. I tend to do it that way. And I'm just drawing in where the lines for the drain, water goes down into the drain, and a hole for the drain. Again, I'm going to say that my videos are not how-to videos. If you're looking for a how-to, this is not the place. However, in the process of watching these, you could learn something or get ideas or whatever, or not. But this is just my process for doing dowel furniture. And these are, again, based on a mid-1930s style of furniture that came out by Strombecker and Cage, which were very simple construction. And I really love those. I think they're very charming, and you can mix realistic things with them. But mine are not, my furniture is not particularly realistic. It is a little crude because I'm learning. And I'm learning quickly, and it's getting better. Every piece I make, I learn a little more. And that's what the process is about, is learning. And this little piece I'm measuring here is the front. There'll be a scoop in it so that most of the sink will show, but the very bottom edge will be out of sight. But you'll see that as I go along. And again, I'm basing this on the Strombecker Cage style furniture. However, the first house my husband and I bought when we got married was an old Sears catalog house from the 1880s. And it had a sink like this in the house, plus a refrigerator, a gas-run refrigerator, very like the one that you'll see in the images later on. And we kept that sink in place, but we didn't keep the refrigerator. I gave it to my brother-in-law, and I think I mentioned that in another video. He still has it. Now I'm just putting some pins in to stabilize the balsa wood that I'm going to put in with some glue. These are just pins that I've cut the heads off of, and it keeps the piece upright so that the glue can dry, and I'm just using wood glue. Same wood glue I always use. And just have to make sure that fits properly. And I want it to be, the sink top to be flush with those pieces. And there's that piece I said earlier about the front, and it just fits around the bottom. And that will be glued in as well. And there's the faucet set, and that fits just perfectly on top of that little piece of wood behind the sink. Now I painted the inside of the sink with wood glue just to give it a little sheen. And now I'm going to paint the sink white after having sanded it. And I'm just using golden paint. This is not a matte finish. And I'll give it several coats of paint and let it dry completely in between coats. Now, I may be a novice when it comes to building doll furniture, but I'm not a novice painter. So, I mean, I paint in oils, I illustrate books, I illustrate my own children's books, and I lived as an artist for many, many years, a gallery artist. And I also taught for many years at the college level, studio art. So most of the materials I use I'm very familiar with in one way or another, but it's just this building process. Now I'm just using a little epoxy sculpt to go in and reinforce the wood, the balsa joints. And this is a 2-part epoxy resin that you will push into the corners and then carve it out, and it makes a very hard locked joint when you do this. And I'm just carving the excess away. And I'm also putting some on the legs, and you'll see that soon. This is just the sides of the sink that surrounds the wooden part that surrounds the sink. And I'll just work some of this into the legs just to make sure that they're really sturdy, and then I'll sand this excess stuff off later when it cures. You can start sanding it in about 10 to 15 hours, but it's probably better to wait a full 48 hours before you do that, unless you are very careful. Now I'm giving the sink another sanding between painting, and make sure there's no little nubs on it, or as few as possible. I'm using a very fine grit sandpaper. I think it's 1500. And I pinned this together with the wood glue. I just stuck corsage pins into it. Seems to work out really well, and it doesn't leave these big holes. And whatever little hole is left, the paint seems to fill it in really well. All right, that fits pretty well. And I'm just clipping off a few edges here and there to make sure that it's both the same size. Also, I wanted to make sure that the sides of this were very sturdy, so I clipped off an extra piece, glued it on. I'll let it dry, and then I'm just evening it out because the balsa wood was quite thin. It's just to reinforce the inside. And I'm going to put a bottom on it. I'm not going to have visible plumbing beneath it, so this isn't a concern. I'm giving it the 3rd coat. Again, it's just golden paint. It's not a matte finish, though. And there again is the front of it. And I'm going to put little side pieces on it too to clean up the edges and make sure everything is flush around the edges. I'm just using the miter scissors to cut it. I'm going to need to change the blades on these miter scissors soon. And if there's anything hanging off at the end, I'll either sand it or cut it off with an X-Acto knife. Now the sink, the final coat, I'm putting a diamond glaze on it, and that will make it look more like ceramic. And I did that, and I glued it in. just putting more glue on the bottom, and I'm going to put that little piece on the front in there. And I cut it so that it was rounded around the edges, and then the bottom will go in. And then the legs will go in last. You don't see what I'm doing, probably. I'm still having trouble getting my work into the camera field of vision. And I just put some pins in to hold it, and then I can put the bottom on. And again, the pins are not so heavy that they leave holes that can't be filled with a little paint. And that bottom piece will reinforce the sink as well. And I just put it on the bottom, and then I'll wait for it to dry. And when it's dry, I'll put the legs on. And it's dry now, and the legs are going to go on. And I just use these plain legs, plain square pieces of balsa that I cut up the same size, because I intend on putting a skirt around this. We had a sink when I was growing up that I think it was in our house. Maybe it was in somebody else's, an aunt or somebody. I don't remember, but we had a skirt around some sink, or somebody did that was close. So to hide the stuff under the sink, you could store stuff under there and you didn't have to look at the plumbing. Now, I had built the table before, but I wasn't happy with the leg height. So what I did is I pulled the legs off, and I'm going through now, and I'm just going to recut them all. This is a hardwood, and they're actually banisters, I believe, dollhouse banisters. I got a package of about 10 or so of them, maybe it was 12, and I'm just going to cut them and use these as legs because they have a little bit of a decorative ending on them, and I thought they looked a lot better than just the square. And I didn't use them for the sink because I'm going to cover the bottom edge of the sink. And I'm resanding the top of the table because I got some stains on it. And I'll repaint the whole thing. I'm just using an emery board from the dollar store to finish sand it. Now just put these legs in. Hopefully they'll be straight when I'm done. Couldn't use pins to put these in. So I just kept fooling with it. I did try to put pins in them on the edges. I don't think it really helped though. I couldn't stick the pins right into the wood, so too hard. Just let that dry and take it out of the way. Now I'm going to make a little side table. And this is actually an end piece of a box that I cut up that came from Dollar Tree. I cut the entire box apart. And the reason why I did that is I actually ended up making the stove out of it. And I'm going to put a little decorative piece on the front that looks like a drawer. I'm not making a drawer that will open. I'm just not going to do that at this point. And this will sort of accent the stove that I'm going to put together. That's the top. I just want to make sure that the edges are all nice and smooth. And what you saw me doing there is I use a paintbrush to dust off my sandpaper and make it more usable. Okay, and those, I'm going to use the same legs that I used on the table, and I'm going to cut them to size. Now I'm going to sand this up a little bit and repaint it, and take off any sharp edges. I've Put the diamond coat on already, as I talked about before, so you can kind of see it. It's shiny now, the sink. And I need to put the drain in after it's painted and sanded, and also the faucet set. So I just mixed up some paint, and I'm just going to give it another quick coat here. And the legs aren't quite straight enough. I should have been a little more careful, but you won't see them, so I didn't stress about it. As long as it stands up straight, they will be covered anyway, so. This is a color called Jadeite, and it was a very popular color I think starting in the 1920s and going all the way through to the beginning of the 60s. And there were a lot of people who wanted these jadeite kitchens, and a lot of the porcelain would be jadeite, and enamelware, and all sorts of things to make the room look, well, kind of cozy. Here's the stove. Now, how I made this is I cut up a box that you can get at the Dollar Tree, and I cut a piece out, and I made the little table with that piece you see where the burners go. Now, the legs on this I didn't keep. I carved some legs, and I didn't like them. Now we're back to the sink, and I'm just going to glue on the faucet set with super glue, and I actually put a snap into the drain as the drain. Looks like a drain to me, so it's actually a half of a fastener or snap. Now I'm just going to sand this again. I sanded it once before, but you didn't see it. It's just, I painted it twice already and then sanded it. And now I'm sanding it again. I ended up sanding the table a couple of times too, so I'm going to give that another coat. The top, so it's just a little less rough than it was. And the legs, of course, because I put new legs on it. And this is going to be the stove, a gas stove. And as I said before, I'm going to knock those legs off and put new ones on. And that's the back. It will be open, but you can see it was a box. And this is the table that will go next to the stove. And it's made from the little piece of the box I took out of the stove. And then I'll put the legs on this and some hardware. Now there's the stove, there's the sink finished, and the stove, and there's a clock I'm going to hang up, and actually not that clock, I changed my mind about the bigger one, it'll be a smaller clock. Okay, now I've got the legs that I'm measuring out for the little table, and there's my little, I've had this saw and this miter for years, and now I'm really making use of it. Haven't used it in a few years. And I'll just saw each one of these, put them in, and just glue them in place. Give it another sanding, make sure everything is smooth, or as smooth as possible. And there, I use my paintbrush to clean off the sandpaper again. I do tend to paint in between, sand in between paintings, especially with this matte finish paint. And I just trimmed off a few pieces that looked like they were making it so the tabletop wasn't going to stay on in an even fashion. Okay, now I'm making a different pair of legs, and I'm making it out of hardboard. And these are going to be more in keeping with the style, and I made 4 pieces. I had cut out one already, and 2 will make 1 leg, and I'll glue them together, and then I'll put a little epoxy in between them to reinforce them, and I'll sand and paint these as well, and then this will be the stove legs in the front. So there's 2 legs. I'm going to leave the straight legs on the back. And I'm closing up the sides with a little extra super glue that I can sand later. And these will fit in the front. That's a little graphic of a stovetop I cut out, I printed and cut out, and you saw very quickly. I'm going to use Milliput for this, which is basically the same thing as the other stuff I was using, the epoxy sculpt, only this is stickier, but I have it and I'm going to use it up, so I thought I'd put this in the legs to make them more solid. And it really gets all over the place. It's not quite the same as epoxy sculpt, but it'll do the same job. It's just sticky, messy. Although they make a terracotta color that I really like, and you can make pottery and stuff out of it, and it's really nice. There's that table. It's not quite done, but I have to do some more painting on it. There's the stove. I put the same decorative panels on the stove as I did on the little table. I'll finish the kitchen table now. Get that all painted. And now I'm painting the panels that I put on the stove and the legs. And you can see the legs, they're quite a bit different than what was on there before. It's now more in keeping with the style of stove of the time. And I'll show you, this I think is a Strombacher stove, 1933. So I'm basing it somewhat on that, but not the legs. And that was what it looked like when I drew it out before I started working on it. And that's, it's similar. It's not exactly the same. The legs will be shorter. And this is a 1933 stove, the jadeite stove. Okay, back to the sink. I'm just taking off any extra glue. And now I'm going to make some more lines on this so that it looks kind of like the Strombacher stove. This is an ink pencil. I went around, and I'm also using marker. And I'm also going to use a fountain pen to get a really black line around the whole thing. And I'll do this on that little table as well. And then if I make any mistakes, I'll take my jadeite paint and just touch it up. And that's the inking pen. It's called Ink Intense. And it's water soluble, but it's a very dark pencil. Comes in all sorts of colors. Prismacolor pencils. And that's actually a fountain pen. And I'm going over it in the little cracks that wouldn't take the pencil or the marker. And it's very black. So I use 3 different mediums to get that edge around it. Now I made the chairs. I made them a very simple 3-piece construction. And that was the first one I made, but it was too small, so I redesigned them. And that's the first one I cut out and glued. And I just used a lollipop stick cut to put where you see the black chair rail support, whatever you call it. And I'm just giving these a quick sand, and then I'll paint them. And these were pretty easy to make. And they are in keeping with that style of furniture that I have been talking about all along. So I'm also going to put a stamp design on these just to give them a little more interest. There I put the graphic on, the stovetop graphic, and then I'll put some varnish over the top of that, just that. I glued it on with tacky glue. And now I'm going to put the controllers on it and handles. And these are just black beads that I had forever. And I'm just going to put them on with super glue. And it's the Ultra Control glue. And I'm just eyeballing it. There needs to be 5. The middle one will be for the oven. And the other 4 are for the burners. One oven bakes, the others are more warming, and then there's also one that's, I can't remember what it's for. They're a little different. That's the handles that pull for the oven. It's a straight bead and 2 seed beads on the side with a piece of wire between, and then they're glued together. And that's going to be the handles. It's one of those little straight glass beads, and then a black glass bead on each end. That's a tiny seed bead. And there it is. And I just put it on with wire, and then I glued them. And then they'll be glued into place. And the stove will be finished. There's the first handle. And there's 3 handles altogether. This oven was very easy to make. I made it, as I said, out of a box I got from the Dollar Tree, one of those stackable wooden boxes. It's the smallest one. Sawing it wasn't all that easy, that chunk out of there, but I did it. And I'm going to put the rest of these chairs together. And I use pins to stabilize them so that when they dry, they're straight. I used both super glue and wood glue. I put super glue on the ends so that it would dry quickly, and the wood glue was in the center. And I did that for all of them. And there's one that hasn't been painted. I used a stamp with some black ink, and I put a stamp on the front of each chair and on the back of each chair. Here's the fabric I used. It's Liberty of London, very fine lawn, so it's very easy to fold, and it's very thin. I made napkins out of that, and here's some over 100 years old lace, and I used that for the tablecloth, the curtains, and a few other things to skirt around the sink. Here's how I folded the napkin. I just folded it up, put a little bit of super glue on it, and then I got a jump ring, a double one, it's a copper colored one, and just put the jump ring around it. And it turned out pretty cute. Very easy. And I put those on each plate. And there's only a 3-place setting in this setup that you will see. I had this big box of stuff, and I took all the things out of it that I wanted to use in the house. And I had more than I thought. I had tableware, dishes, whole sets of dishes, all sorts of stuff. This is just the leftover stuff I didn't put in there. I wanted to put that chicken in a pot, but it's a little bit too big. And I wanted to use that dessert, but I thought, well, more is not necessarily better. That's a really old plate. And there's a coffee pot, and it was a strainer. There's another piece of dessert, a lid, a rolling pin. The rolling pin was a little too big. I didn't use that, obviously. I wanted to put a barrel in, but I didn't. Here is the finished product. I built a room that I can actually take the walls out of and the floor, so I can put other things in this and display it before I put them in my dollhouse. And that's actually a kind of forced perspective. I made the window in the back. Those are the antique lace curtains that are up, and the tablecloth, and the skirt around the sink, which you'll see shortly, and also a sort of table runner in the back where there's 2 pots to the left of the sink over an older piece of furniture that I painted that's 1/16 size. And I made the clock above the refrigerator. I did not make the refrigerator, I painted it though. But I made the table, the stove, the dish rack, created the pictures, and made that sink. And I designed the wallpaper off of an antique wallpaper that was from the 30s, and the linoleum floor as well. That's quite old, that little oil lamp. It's a little bigger than 1/12, but I thought it worked out just fine. And there's a table setting. There's a plate on each place where the family is going to sit, in the silverware, cups. And you saw me make the plate rack in another video, and the shelf to the far right with the canned goods. And here's the family. These are Horseman dolls from the 1990s, and I redid all of their clothing. And there they are. Well, thank you for watching, and please like and subscribe. It helps a lot to keep me going. And leave a comment. And I'll be having more videos shortly. Bye-bye.